Hello there, and welcome to the Construction Revolution podcast. My name is Stephen Rossi, and here on the show, we explore the latest trends, technologies, people, and organizations that are revolutionizing or disrupting the construction industry and are changing what the industry will look like tomorrow. Today, we welcome Mike Pink, founder and CEO of SmartPM Technologies. With over 20 years of experience in project controls, risk management, and delay analysis, Mike has dedicated his career to solving one of construction's most persistent challenges, schedule mismanagement. SmartPM is a powerful analytics platform that transforms raw scheduling data into real-time insights, helping project teams stay on time, on budget, and reduce risk. Join us as we explore how SmartPM is using AI and automation to bring clarity, accountability, and smarter decision-making to construction scheduling. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the Construction Revolution podcast. How's it going today?
Going well. How about yourself?
It's doing good. Glad we're able to connect and learn more about you and SmartPM.
Me as well.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. So can you tell me the story of how SmartPM was founded and where you got the idea for the company?
Yeah, I had worked in construction consulting for many, many years, right out of college. As a construction consultant, we're not actually building things. Day to day, we're getting involved in projects. And most of the time, when people want to call a consultant, it's when they have problems, whether the project's late and over budget, or it's headed down a bad path, or some organizations just want to do an assignment where you can come in and help them set themselves up for success. But most of the time, you're getting called when there's problems, and in a lot of cases, those are disputes, projects that are late and over budget. So I spent a lot of my time wrapping my head around, what happened on a job that led to a point where it was, months, if not years late, or tens of millions of dollars over budget, because that's the point where people are needing to get answers to figure out who owes who what. And I just saw that so many times that you know that I started to see patterns through the data. I also recognized that for the work that I did, if I needed to understand thoroughly what went on a project to lead to this place, I saw a pattern where schedule data was very meaningful to me. It was probably the most effective data set that I could get my hands on to understand a project, and understand it to a point where people who actually lived it didn't even have that much insight that I did. So that started to tell me something, that there's some very meaningful data here that will help people understand things that they generally don't have understanding of without studying this data. The data is not readily available to be studied anyway in construction, and that's really where we start to see problems happening. People not spending time focusing in the right areas, people not understanding, the trajectory that they're on, and that was just very evident. Um, Having done that as many times as I did, I realized that there's only one way to solve this problem that seems pretty rampant in construction, is to enable people to understand this data. So we set out to inform through data that people already had, namely the schedule data as our foundational data set, but it needed to be done in real time, and it needed to speak volumes more than just the schedule file itself. So that's really what set me on my path for SmartPM.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the insight. I'm sure being a consultant, you must have seen some pretty crazy things.
Yeah, well, it's not actually crazy. It seems as though it's a very normal thing in construction that you sign up for something and things don't go as planned, and it ends up costing money, and people have to make a lot of concessions. Uh, Either that, or they have to get into a dispute. And really, what's happening all along is the plan is going off course, and it needs to be corrected. And I believe that you can get there through the data you have.
Right. So speaking of that data, you mentioned like the scheduling data before Smart PM. It exists, but obviously it's can be like in spreadsheets, I imagine, or even just on paper in the trailer. Can you tell me a little bit about the traditional like manual scheduling process and then how Smart PM differs to that?
Yeah. So we're first of all, Smart PM's not a scheduling platform. People use scheduling platforms to manage jobs. That they use things like Primavera or Microsoft Project. It's what's called critical path method technology. It's a tool where people can lay out everything that needs to get done on a project, assign logic, and then it creates a plan. That plan is extrapolated over a calendar, so you can see all the things that need to be happening over time. Um, that's a process that exists. It's just very complex, right? So if you think about a typical commercial project, it could be anywhere between 2 and 3,000 activities, sometimes more, sometimes 1,000 activities, but that usually gets printed out on paper and handed to somebody in the field to understand, what work needs to come in what order. And it's not like 3 sheets; it's like 50 to 100 sheets of paper that people are flipping through to understand. It's great at making sure you know what to do over the next month, but then there's a whole story about how's this thing going to unfold over the next 2 years. And generally speaking, it's good at that, good at setting up a plan, but tracking performance against that plan, and and understanding what deviations from the plan are occurring and why they're happening, and what the long term effect of those issues are, and whether or not the schedule is even feasible. Those are all things that don't exist, and that's really what Smart PM does: is start to analyze that data and put it into terms that people can understand performance and risk for what it is, as well as understanding, you know, issues that are impacting the job now, and what that means for the future of the job.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that. So, Um, in terms of what are like you kind of touched on, I guess the challenge, a little bit of the challenges that from traditional processes. What would you say is like the biggest challenge you've seen in scheduling and schedule management, and how does Smart PM address that?
Sure. Well, number one of the biggest problems that exists in schedule management is the level of education to build and manage a schedule well. Quality of the data is not very good. Best practices were never really taught to the broader industry. There's a series of about 35 different things that you want to be tracking or could be tracking to ensure that the schedule is built well enough to manage a job. And that's really at the foundation of what we do. That the tip of the iceberg is making sure that the schedule process is being, the schedule is being built well enough to manage a job. And then people are following best practices in the updating cycle. Schedules get updated periodically to understand where the project's at and what's ahead, and what needs to happen to manage to the end date. And that process doesn't get, you know, that process is kind of broken too. People make, delay the job, right the ship through changes. They don't test whether or not the changes are feasible, whether or not the schedule is still built well enough to manage a job. And I would say that if that problem's not solved, there's no good analytics that you could get to actually understand performance for what it is and really identify the key areas of risk that you really need to be on top of, so people lose sight of how to spend their time day in and day out putting out fires that exist. They end up putting out all fires and not focusing on the key ones that drive the job.
Yeah. Okay. So from a Smart PM side, like obviously you guys have a lot of data now that you've collected from so many different projects. Are you able to recognize patterns and sort of how do you present those potential issues, like you mentioned, in terms of changes or initial scheduling to customers?
Oh, well, we have to bring it to a level that's digestible. So we do have a lot of trends, progress trends, change trends, delay trends, schedule quality trends, hit rates, all of that stuff plays together. Compression, being able to look at all of these things together starts to build a story of whether or not the project's going well or if it's not going well or if it's veering off course. And, catching that course correction at the right time is imperative to success. By and large, in the industry, people make decisions that are creating an already aggressive thing to be even more aggressive and more aggressive and more aggressive, and they're not understanding the underlying problems that live behind the schedule on the day-to-day stuff like RFI changes, delivery issues, labor issues, and identifying those as problems that, if extrapolated, we're headed down this path. So we want to bring that all to life here, and we want to put it into terms that overcome the over optimism bias that does exist in construction in general. So those are some of the things that we show. The other things that we show are, how are the subcontractors performing together? Which subcontractors are, doing well, and which ones are going to be causing problems today and down the road, so that you can really key in and focus on which subs require the most support and or guidance to overcome the obstacles that we will see pan out on this job. We're also looking at changes in RFIs and material procurement and review submittal processes that will ultimately guide you to a better outcome as well, and starting to prioritize those things so you know how to handle your time day to day as a PM.
Right. So yeah, so you mentioned on the PM side. So I know Smart PM, you have users like on the GC, so the PM side, but also like owners and developers. So I'm curious, who is it often the GC that's your customer and then the PM driving that, or do you have owners and developers as your customer as well, and they kind of share it with the GC? Like, how does that work?
We work with both. So when it comes to a construction company, there's two groups that we generally will work with, or more than that, actually. The site teams get benefit from the tool itself, but operations needs to understand this data as well. The way that one of these companies works is they've got a headquarters somewhere, and they've got a lot of projects out there going on, and nobody really has visibility into performance on those jobs or any issues that are budding that would detract that project from a successful completion. Product project managers need to know that on their specific job, but the operations folks and executives need to have visibility on where their good projects are and where their poor projects are, and really hone in on making sure that the site teams that are struggling with performance are have the support they need to right the ship and deliver. So we that's what we sell to contractors: is visibility, accountability, and then insights into performance at the site level, so that the site teams have what they need to be successful. But on the flip side, an owner is sort of in the dark, right? They hire a contractor. The contractor agrees to do something over a certain amount of time, and as for a certain budget. And time is extremely important to owners to get a timely completion. And usually, what happens is projects don't progress as planned. There's a lot of different things happening, a lot of different uncertainties that are occurring, and to feel comfortable with that, to know that the delivery will still be on time, the owner does need some insight into that, and they have access to the same data. So just by simply capturing that and loading it in, they get, an objective opinion about performance and risk that they can leverage to have meaningful conversation, right? One thing that is very true is, projects veer off course, probably around the 30 to 50% range, continue off course until the 75% range, and then there's a big kick save at the end. What we're trying to do with both sides of the equation are seeing the patterns, seeing the writing on the wall before it's too late, so that good decisions can be made and good solutions can be created to overcome the obstacles that have accumulated over time to date.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I you touched on it a little bit, like obviously the GC and the owner and developers, the needs that they have are often competing. So how do you balance those different needs and the fact that yeah, at the end of the day, like a lot of the time things can lead to disputes and things like that.
Well, one thing's for sure, both organizations want the same thing. Uh, Both of them want to get the project done on time. Both of them want to get the project done on budget. Uh, Both of them don't want to be stressed throughout the whole process. So I think that they have very similar needs and wants, but they do have competing interests on the job, right? Um, you know, Contractors would generally, want to get done on time to alleviate the risk of having to fund for additional extra months, because when a construction company is involved, they're taking on risk by even assuming the contract and saying I'll get this thing done in 20 months for $30 million. Each month that it's late, the contractor's technically on the hook to pay for the people and all the equipment and all the trailers and whatnot for that extra month, unless of course they can prove to the owner that the delays that have happened on this job are not my fault, they're your fault, which is really the big question. Owners, on the other hand, want to receive that asset timely because they have a business model behind it, right? It's supposed to generate revenue in some way, shape, or form, whether it's an office building, a manufacturing facility, whatever it may be. There's some sort of business use case there, so timeliness is important to achieve the revenue generation goals of the owner. But one of them's losing revenue while the other one's spending more money. So if you think about a project that's late, the contractor has to is funding that delay. They're going to want that money back from the owner. The owner's losing revenue, and they don't believe that they're the ones building the building, and how could they have caused that delay? So it's actually double. Both of them are sort of going in opposite directions of losing money, and both of them want to be compensated for that. So it's not just the additional cost or the additional time. It's all about the loss of revenue. Even the contractors losing revenue on their next job. So it becomes a very muddy, area where there's a lot of disagreement in terms of who owes who what and who was impacted more and who's ultimately responsible, which is why we see a lot of this getting ironed out in the mediation, arbitration, litigation world, which is where no one wants to be. And I think that's the last piece: is both those sides don't want to end up there either. So to me, the answer is, let's get ahead of the curve here. Let's understand that construction's not easy and there's a lot of uncertainty, but let's also know that we have data that can tell us a lot about these things, that if we collectively look at it and we discuss it and we collaborate upon it, both of us could be happy at the end of the job and get that thing delivered on time or on budget, and none of us will be arguing about it. And that's really what I believe, having lived in my consulting world, where a lot of people weren't focused on that data as soon as they should be and have it in real time, to get to that place where both sides are, in lockstep trying to accomplish the same goal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great explanation of both sides. Um, So speaking of all the data, I know SmartPM integrates with some broader project management softwares like Procore and stuff like that. How does real-time access to the scheduling analytics and the trend we're seeing towards connected jobs, how do you see that sort of evolving, and what's the importance of integrating with tools like that?
Well, first of all, I think, you know, all data should be integrated. Just going back to my experience of trying to understand a construction project, there was three levels of information, or more than that actually, that I would need to get into to actually truly understand performance on a job and understand impacts and be able to do this short and long term. The schedule is more of my calculation engine, where I would be able to study that data and know, performance, what areas are causing problems, what does that mean today, what does that mean in the future. what needs to happen to overcome those challenges. But that would be generally, based on locations or trades in an organization in a project. But I couldn't understand why it was happening. Once you get into the PM data, you're able to look at changes, you're able to look at RFIs, you're able to look at, you know, delivery dates and material deliveries, and you're able to look at weather and all those kinds of things. Those are all the issues that would result in impacts. So once I understood where are all the impacts happening and what are the short and long term effects are of those impacts, I'd be able to go back to the PM system and understand, what are the issues that are causing these? Is it more related to design? Is it more related to performance? Is it more related to RFIs? Is it not enough resources? Is it, weather issues? Is it change issues? Is it procurement issues? You are able to get that information through, the PM system because it's generally outlined in a lot of the correspondence. And then the last piece was, cost, right? Now, how much is it going to cost? And that really needs to layer in from the cost system. And then that cost system helps you better understand resource needs, not only resources showing up, but resource needs, as well as where inefficiencies are occurring that are resulting in impacts. So all of those three worlds need to be merged together, and it needs to be merged together very well if you truly want to document and understand performance and risk on your jobs.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, so looking ahead, how do you see Smart PM evolving over the next, let's say, 5+ years? And even shorter term, is there anything exciting that you're working on that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that we can share is we just got approved for FedRAMP, which was very important to us. We can start working with the federal government instead of just the private industry. So that's really cool. But we're really taking advantage of what's going on with AI right now. We've got a lot of different data, a lot of data related to project performance based on hundreds of thousands of schedules. A lot of that schedule data needed to be understood, and a lot of the data integrity issues needed to be understood so that we can still get good analytics from that. So we're now at a place where we can understand projects thoroughly and what constitutes good outcomes, what drives good outcomes. But we also created, an ability for AI to really look at trade interaction on projects of different types and sizes and locations. So we can start to detect patterns that, constructively influence outcomes versus detract them from success based on how the subs are interacting, which we're now using to assist in giving recommendations in terms of trade flow and how to link the trades together successfully on different project types of different sizes. The other thing that we've spent some time doing is mapping RFI data, change data, as well as procurement data into the schedule, because the schedule is an ever evolving thing with a lot of changes that are happening. Which, if you think about how people spend their time in construction on those things, they don't really have visibility on which RFI is the most critical and which change order is going to cause the most disruption if delayed, or which procurement issue are we starting to see a problem on their delivery that's going to cause an effect down the road. By mapping all that data into the schedule directly and tying it in from those PM systems, we can start to provide value to the people that are working day to day to know where to spend their time and energy. All technology out there today is about streamlining processes and being more efficient, but there's not really a technology out there other than Smart PM that enables companies to really know what high priority activities there are versus activities that have room for, well, float really, so that they can push off what they don't have time for today and really key in on the most important pieces. Right now, that really doesn't exist. It's really done by gut. And generally speaking, the quality of the schedule directly relates to how you use that information and to determine those things. So we're attacking that problem from all different angles. And we're also looking at how did you do in all regards in terms of time management and focus on areas that should have been focused on to manage to a successful completion. So that is really what we're working on today. Soon, we're going to be pulling in cost and resource data to help people make decisions on resource needs and know it with certainty, know which trades are going to be driving the job, whether the schedule says it or not, based on all of our experience in this data set. So, a lot of different things that are happening today, but ultimately, I view Smart PM as being probably the first and only tool of record where you have all of your data feeding into one place, relevant to your project and your portfolio, providing visibility and reports around to the right people at the right time to ensure success on your jobs and do it systematically. But it is an effort of getting all that data pulled together the right way, understood in the right place at the right time so that we can continue to evolve and optimize this industry.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, sounds like that's a exciting future, and I imagine you and your team are very busy working on all of that. And also, congratulations on the approval for that. That's a big that you can get on more projects like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
So, stepping away from Smart PM for a second, and you touched on how AI is changing everything, but I'm curious, uh, in through your work with Smart PM, but also in consulting, what sort of other innovations are you seeing in the industry apart from schedule management, and are there any that really excite you?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot more access to information a lot quicker. That is one area that I saw people spending a lot of time on was how to find good information and how to get to answers quicker. I mean, we have our own lane of that and knowing how to prioritize your time, but there's also getting information, understanding that information, and doing it quickly. I'm seeing more and more of that being, brought forth through, a lot of these LLM type technologies. So I see that happening all over. I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about that in our own tool. We have a project controls agent now that starts to guide you to making better decisions along the way and understanding the things on your job. But seeing that in more and more tools is pretty exciting to me. I think it's going to make many people's lives easier. And getting that right information into the hands of the right people at the right time.
Right. Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think real time data and the insight that comes from that, yeah, is something we're seeing throughout the construction industry, which can only help things.
Absolutely.
So, just to wrap up here, then, for companies who are interested in learning more about Smart PM, where should they go and what does that sort of initial process look like in getting onboarded?
Yeah, I think obviously you go to our website, www.smartpm.com. Our goal is generally to meet a customer where they're at with the information that they have. Usually started with the scheduled data, and it could be different for many different company types. A large construction organization that has project controls teams and scheduling specialists, they generally get caught up in trying to do this at scale. Sometimes they try to build their own, processes, but they get very it's very difficult to do that and to do it well. What we do is we enable you to scale your abilities across the entire, value chain here, and really start to cut the time down by about 90% to achieve what you need to achieve, which obviously gives scale and breadth for an organization. Smaller companies we that generally don't have a project controls team and maybe not that strong on the scheduling side of things, we usually meet them earlier. I call it the project controls journey. We introduce them to that journey and we start solving the schedule quality problem. Then we move into the analytics and then we get into the more reporting and communication side of things. And then on the flip side with owners, it really depends, what data do they have, how do we leverage that data and how do we train them to have good meaningful conversations to protect their own risk. So it's really a matter of where is the company in their life cycle when it comes to analytics and project controls, and how do we bolster that up correctly over what period of time. But all we really do need is scheduled data to get started.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for your time, Michael, and I'm excited to see how Smart PM continues to grow and change schedule management.
Absolutely, and thank you for your time, Stephen.